Respected Chairman, sir, the dignitary is present, the August gathering. So I will be speaking on what ought I to do. The Mahabharata's perspective, and I have chosen the book of Sujatya for that. So since we have been talking about what ought I to do, that is basically not what should be done. It is about what I should do. And the paper will be concentrating on what is it that actually determines what we should do. In life, what I do is determined by what I set as a goal of my life. In other words, what I want from life determines what I consider as it should be done. Thus, the question, what ought I to do, may be answered only with reference to what is considered as purpose of one's life. In this light, the issue that remains important for morality is what should be considered as a significant in human life. For that alone, Sujatya recognizes two sets of people, depending on the purpose of life. One kind considers attainment of self as the goal, and the other wants to achieve heaven. For the first kind, it is acquisition of knowledge which is important, while for the second, it is actions that will bring heaven to them. It is attainment of self, which is actually important in Sujatya. We see it as Sujatya advocates knowledge. The reason for his advocacy is that knowledge of the self is the one that makes one overcome death. That Sujatya opposes actions for result is clear from the fact that it declares that action for fruit will not be able to make us go over death. Sujatya is against a desire for fruit of action itself, as it identifies desire with death, desire with its effect of wrath and delusion. Now the question is, what happens when we get the knowledge of the self? Sujatya says that by following the right path, we become the supreme self. So that is why it actually suggested that we should have knowledge of the self. Then we will become the supreme self. It considers that the supreme self cannot be found anywhere except in the man of high vows. Quote, "It dwells not in art, nor in the sky, nor does it bear a body in this ocean-like world. It is not to be seen in Rik, nor in Yajus, nor in Atharvan, nor in the pure Saman, nor yet talking in the Rathantara or Brihadratha hymns. It is to be found only in the self of high vows." Unquote. Sujatya thus identifies supreme self with Brahman, on which the world rests, and says that it is through understanding of this that one becomes immortal. However, this Brahman appears to be capable of being understood only with the help of self. It has been observed that Brahman, that is identified as the supreme self, is regarded as the foundation of the universe. Now, Sujatya considers truth also as the foundation of the universe. And it also says that immortality depends on truth. In other words, Sujatya is identifying supreme self with the truth. It holds the truth to be only one. It says that It is lack of knowledge of that one, because of which multifariousness emerges. Quote, through ignorance of the one Veda, the one truth, O King of Kings, numerous Veda came into existence, unquote. Sanat Sujatya says that it is only adherence to truth, the Brahman, that makes one a Brahman. So by implication, one who is dedicated to many cannot be a Brahmana. And because truth is one, therefore, when we know truth, it is said that we are omniscient. According to Sanat Sujatya, there are no things apart from the Supreme Self. It can consider going out in search of enjoyment of object as delusional. So it is only because we do not think that there is one, that we do not know that there is only one, we go out in search of enjoyment. But the Supreme Self is considered as a not different from self itself by Sanat Sujatya, for it says that enjoyment of object is sought by one who has not understood the identity of self and the Supreme. In other words, it has now identified the self with the Supreme. Therefore, the knowledge of the self is so important. Thus, Sanat Sujatya can say that the one whose self is contaminated by the unreals actually deliberates on the object. Only when we are attached with the unreals, we start thinking about the objects. Quote, having his inner self contaminated by contact with unreal entities, he devotes himself to objects of sense on all sides, pondering only them. Unquote. According to Sanat Sujatya, it is the contemplation of on the objects that leads to desires for them, which, when not fulfilled, gives rise to wrath. And it is desire and wrath which, in fact, are considered as causes of death. So the more we think, the desire we have not fulfilled, we have wrath, and they cause us death. Now it appears to be identifying that with transmigration. On one hand, it says that it is with the unreal objects that there is the development of desire, which ends up in death. On the other hand, it is saying that contact with unreal entities make one migrate. So we can identify death, transmigration, and desire. The reason for an identification of death and migration may be attributed to the fact that transmigration implies repeated death. In fact, it is only when one understands that transmigration as a death that one can really appreciate desire and death being identified. As one desires, one needs to continue for fulfillment of desires, birth after birth. This is transmigration, involving repeated deaths and simply death. Sanat Sujatya is clear that it is desire which is to be gotten rid of, as it is desire wherein death or destruction lies. Quote, the being who pursues desires is destroyed in pursuing after desires, but casting over desires, a being gets rid of all taint whatsoever. Unquote. In fact, the answer to the question, why Sanat Sujatya regards knowledge as desirable, lies in the very fact of undesirableness of desire. Sanat Sujatya says that it is contemplation on self that helps us from not thinking about objects. Further, in knowledge, as one comes to realize itself to be not different from Supreme Self, which is the only real, one comprehends that there are no other objects for desiring. This leads to ending of desire and consequently of death. Thus it is declared that it is in knowledge that there is no there. Quote, he who, pondering on self, destroys the fugitive objects of sense, not even thinking of them, through contempt for them, and who, being possessed of knowledge, destroys desires in this way, becomes, as it were, death of death, and swallows it up. But the knowledge we are talking about is not knowledge in the ordinary sense in Sujatiya. First, this knowledge of Supreme cannot be gained by knowledge of objects, though knowing it makes us know the objects, so it cannot be gained by knowing objects. Second, it cannot even be gained by learning the Vedas. Supreme Self or Brahman is not in the field of words, language, thought. However, Sujatiya recognizes the role of the Vedas in attainment of knowledge. It says that, though the Vedas cannot give knowledge of the real, they do help to reach the knowledge by being pointer to the truth. To have the knowledge of Brahman, or rather for the Brahman to reveal itself, one has to contemplate on it after hearing about it. So that is how Vedas help us to gain the knowledge of the Supreme. One who stays faithful to Brahman can use the Vedas for the purpose of gaining knowledge of Brahman and can in fact achieve that knowledge. Thirdly, and most importantly probably, is that such a knowledge requires a mind that has gotten over attachment and aversion. That is why we see knowledge of Brahman being not merely theoretical knowledge, practice remains an integral part of this knowledge. The question that remains to be answered is what one is supposed to do and not to do to attain that knowledge. The answer is the answer to the question, what ought I to do? Sujatiya says that sin can be destroyed by piety, dharma. It says that the one who does not boast about his piety becomes a way of gaining knowledge. And such a person is the one who becomes free from suffering. So dharma becomes a way of gaining knowledge, but one cannot be boastful about performing dharma. A Brahmana makes no effort to earn respect, and in fact is not bothered about or is indifferent towards respect or disrespect. A man of piety should regard such human conduct as reflex activities of man. Man will do, they will respect or they will disrespect out of their nature. As self and the world are different, Sujatiya says the trying for attainment of knowledge and desire for recognition do not go together. Sujatiya holds that while recognition rests on worldly wealth, the Brahmic wealth requires knowledge. Regarding what is required to attain it, Sujatiya declares 6 features which are impediments to recognition. So when they are talking about attainment, still they are talking more about what becomes an impediment to recognition. Truth, straightforwardness, modesty, restraint of senses, purity, knowledge, which are the 6 impediments in the way of respect and delusion. So rather than for dharma, they are saying that they are impediments to recognition and delusion. Sujatiya appears to be identifying piety, dharma with penance. It suggests that penance and sacrifice can help in destruction of sin, which in turn helps emergence of knowledge, quote, for that the Brahman, that is to say, for attaining to it, are this penance and sacrifice prescribed. The penance Sujatya talks of as leading one to knowledge is not the penance of ordinary kind. It says that it is the penance of Brahmana alone to be that kind which can be further developed. So not all penance, certain kind of penance. Sujatya calls this penance as pure, and it is with this penance that immortality can be attained. In defining and explaining pure penance, Sujatya speaks out of attributes and qualities to be avoided. It tells of 12 qualities and 7 cruelties to be avoided, and then it will give us 12 excellences. What we see in Indian philosophy is that it hardly talks about how to bring good. It's good. What we are supposed to do is to negate the negated. That is what we are supposed to do. So basically, we will always see we are what we are not supposed to do. The 12 qualities, I will skip. There are 7 cruelties. And these are not said that we are supposed to attain it. It rather says that they are the characteristic features. Sujatya declares that there are 3 traits of self-restraint, dhamma, abandonment, tyaga, and freedom from heedlessness, apramada, out of which owning even one can lead a man to emancipation. However, of all, truth, which is a characteristic of freedom from heedlessness, is regarded as foundational. Sujatya declares a self-restraint as having 18 defects. And who is self-restrained? The one who does not have the defects. So this is what we see, that we are shown the defect and we are not supposed to have them. That is all. We cannot bring the good. 6 kinds of abandonment have been announced as good by Sujatya. Out of that, it considers the 3rd to be such that by it alone we can have self-knowledge. Sujatya elaborates on kinds of abandonment. The first is the giving away of sons and wealth to a deserving man who asks for them. Second is gift at Vedic ceremonies and gift at ceremonies laid down in Smritis. Abandonment of desire, or king of kings, by means of indifference to worldly object is laid down as the 3rd. So it is to be abandoned. Sujatya says that it is abandonment that leads to freedom from heedlessness, or pramada. And this freedom from heedlessness has 8 characteristics. Freedom from heedlessness includes in it also avoidance of problems of self-restraint. In fact, freedom from defect of self-restraint is freedom from heedlessness. We are asked to become free. Knowledge of Supreme Self, says Sujatya, is thus gained only by living. We have to live the life. We cannot simply theorize. And such a living is the living of a brahmachari. For learning to live life as required to be a brahmachari, Sujatya considers living under a preceptor as necessary. So finally then, what do we see? That it is knowledge which is considered as a desirable. How to gain it? Practice penance under the guidance of a preceptor. And this is what we are supposed to do. This is what is the answer to what I ought to do. Thank you.